Hey, folks, just a friendly reminder that all shows on the Madness Comic Network are produced by their individual hosts and in no way reflect the opinions of the network as a whole. The statements in the following broadcast are not necessarily the opinions of the Madness Comic Network, its staff, sponsors, or contributors. This show is rated TVMA, as are all of them and all those other letters. Viewer discretion is highly advised, and, just do what Doc says. Read that again. Peace, everybody.
Clearing streams in stables cold and gray, shadows dance while horses softly neigh. He tells the creatures in the barn each night that one day he'll wear armor shining bright. From dawn to dusk he works with honest hand, feeding mares and working on the land. But he has his heart set on the table round, to join the knights who bravely serve the crown. With a sword and shield he'll join the fight, prove his worth before it's Christmas night. He'll show them all as he sets out on his quest, a gift to himself, a night before Christmas. With a sword and shield he'll join the fight, prove his worth before it's Christmas night. He'll show them all as he sets out on his quest, a gift to himself, a night before Christmas. But chivalry demands self-sacrifice, and when folks need help, this boy does not think twice. He meets the need, though it cost him his dream. But maybe things are more than they seem. With a sword and shield he'll join the fight, prove his worth before it's Christmas night. He'll show them all as he sets out on his quest, a gift to himself, a night before Christmas.
In a world where terrors creep, monsters need their beauty sleep, Dr. Black with steady hand heals the beasts across the land. Vampires and creatures of the night find their savior in Black's light. No more horror guaranteed, thanks to Monster MD. Electric bolts from a stormy sky, leather wings of a dragon's flight, a psychic sword cuts through the night, a fiery heart standing ready to fight. Southern nights they rise and soar, God in the south, yeah, they're ready to roar. From the shadows to the shining lights, that they'll protect you day and night. Southern nights. On a catwalk, Teresa struts her stuff, but
And good evening. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com. And despite how I might come across tonight, I swear I have not had a thing to drink. It's just been a really, really long week, and a lot of things have happened. A lot of things still have to happen. But we are going to have some real fun tonight. We're going to go back to the 80s and talk with one of the seminal voices of creating indie comics back when indie comics were indie. Please welcome with me to the show, Mr. Dennis Mallonee from Heroic Publishing. Dennis, welcome to the show, and thank you for forbearing all of my idiocy that has been going on the past few days. I'm just, like I said, I feel like I'm pulled in a lot of different directions right now.
Well, I'm glad to be here, RJ. You need to send me a link to that little Flare video that I just saw. I had not seen that before.
Well, that was the debut. I didn't want anybody to see it until just then, including you. So,
oh, okay.
I will send you the full file. You can have it.
Thank you. All right. She
Just
is a shining goddess of light.
A glittering goddess of light, right? I mean, that was her tagline.
Well, the tagline was shining goddess of light, but glittering works too.
Oh, well, say this is why you cannot trust what you find on the internet, because the fan pages, the fan wikis.
I think we did use glittering goddess, but it just seemed like shining rang a little bit better. Glittering goddess.
Glittering, yeah. It's
yeah.
a little too
Glittering
disco.
goddess sounds a little bit, I don't know what the word is for it. It sounds a little bit,
it's a little gold lame, a little disco.
yeah.
Wayne Klingman's in the chat saying hi, and Pops is out there with the Madness Comic Network, on which we are simulcasting on 7 different, a bunch of different channels right now. Too many circles for me to count. So we're getting some coverage tonight. We've already got 23 people in here viewing. Welcome, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, share it out. And by the way, if any of the things that Dennis is going to talk about tonight intrigue you, that's his website scrolling along the bottom there. Just pause it at any point and type it in. It's also, if you're watching on YouTube, in the description below the video, the very first link will take you there. And we have some other links that will take you places you're going to want to go. So, Dennis, tell us, let's just go back to do the whole David Copperfield thing. We'll just go back to the very beginning of your career in comics. What got you into this medium? Why did you get into this medium?
Okay, this story, I've told this before. Let's tell it again.
Well, it's always the first time for somebody here.
That is true. Absolutely true. I had been studying economics at Caltech and at UCSD, and I decided, after doing my initial research for my thesis, that I didn't want to do that. So I went into, I shifted over into publishing. For a good 6 years, I published an illustrated science fiction fantasy magazine called Fantasy Book. It was really cool. You can still find those issues. We have them on the website. They're available on eBay. And there's one issue in particular that's really pricey, but you'll see that if you go look. But I always loved comics. I love the medium. Always been a kind of a fan of comic books. Not a fanatical fan, but I love the medium. And I was at the San Diego Con in '85, maybe '86, and I'd been playing the Champions role-playing game with friends of mine. So I went to the Champions panel. We'd actually done a couple of supplements for the Champions people. And at the presentation they were giving, a fan asked when they were going to do a comic book based on the Champions role-playing game. And I raised my hand and said, I'll do it. Because I was publishing anyway. And so the Champions people and I went down to the convention floor, talked to Eclipse Comics, pitched the idea, and they said yes. So I put together a series of stories featuring the original idea was to do a 48-page comic book, right? An old Golden Age style book. First 4 issues would feature stories about the individual characters, and that would segue into a 2-part, champions in action kind of story, where all of those loose ends would come together into a single, long story. And fans would find out how all of those individual stories ended up tying together. So I wrote all those stories up, gave it to Dean and Kat, and they said, no, we want to go right to the hero book. We'll do a hero book, normal size, 6 issues, 23 pages. And I'm going, but the fans won't have any idea what these characters are unless we tell them. And they said, no, that's what we're going to do. So, what can I do? They were publishing it.
So the reason I've been spinning around here, I have been listening very intently, but I had something I wanted to bring up because you said it was that I still have my champion's character sheet and my character drawing that went with this game.
What was his name?
Blue Streak.
Blue Streak. That's cool. Better than yellow.
But yeah, it's like I know I've got something somewhere in my file of everything that I've kept all my life. So this is the stat sheet for character building.
Yeah, I still have almost all of my old Champions characters. They're in a drawer over there. And they're actually good reference. If I ever need, to introduce a particular kind of character, odds are I can find that character in my stack of old things.
It was great for character generation. I mean, I never got to play the game because all of my friends were Dungeons and Dragons people.
Oh, really? You're going to be coming out to California anytime soon?
Not without impetus, but give me one and maybe I will.
We still play Champions pretty much every Saturday evening here. So if you're ever out here, just give me a holler and we'll fold you into game.
I'll definitely do that. I wish I still had. I had my Champions box set. I had my DC role-playing heroes box set, which I see they're reintroducing on Kickstarter now with all the subsidiary box sets. I did have at one point here a couple of modules that I found at a thrift store recently for 50 cents each. So I was like, I don't even play the game, but I want them just to have them now.
Just so people will know, all of those individual stories that I wrote about the characters did eventually get into print. When we took over the book from Eclipse, right, I had all of those stories there, and I just said, okay, well, let's just do them over a period of time. In point of fact, those Flare Girl stories in those first 3 issues of Flare were the Flare stories that I'd written for those first few issues of Champions, giving her backstory, details of her origin, and setting the stage for the revelation that her little brother Philip was in fact the evil demon master. So,
okay. So we're launching right into Flare. Just tell us about that development cycle. I mean, not her secret origin, but your secret origin of her secret origin.
Flare was created by the Champions people, Georgia McDonald, and why am I blanking on his other name? For a young woman named Stacy Thane. She was playing Champions. She needed a character, so they designed one for her. A pretty blonde like Stacy, who had energy powers. Stacy took the character and developed it, ran with it, basically created her personality, set up the original story that she had a secret identity as a librarian, right, which we used in the comics. And the character was compelling. Stacy's a great person, and Flare is basically Stacy. So Stacy as she was, 40 years ago now. Oh, 45.
It has been. I swear the 80s were just like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, well, they were a couple of weeks ago in geologic time. Well, not even that in geologic times. The blink of an eye.
Yeah, it went by so fast. It was a fun time too. But I missed her being a librarian because when I got into reading about Flare, and again, I didn't get all of them. I was a kid, and we didn't have disposable income, so I got intermittent issues among all my other reading material. But she was a fashion model, I thought.
Yes, that was when we launched our own magazine. We wanted. Let me take another step back. Okay, this story has also been told before. When we launched the Champions title, I had these stories sitting back there, and I said, okay, I've got all these stories. Let's find out which of the Champions fans like best. And we'll publish another comic book. We had 3 to start with. Champions, Eternity Smith, and Roy and Dan Thomas as Captain Thunder and Blue Bolt. There was room for a fourth. So we pulled, and I started working on the Marksman comic book. Later, we changed his name to the Huntsman for reasons that we don't need to get into here. Because I figured, guy with gun, right? Military background, that's going to be the most popular character. I was
Sure.
right. And surprisingly, but wonderfully so, by a more than 2-to-1 margin when the votes came in, it was Flair. So, okay, switch gears. We've got.
Yeah, it's even back in the 80s, guys, sexy looking girl in swimsuit costume would rule the stands.
No, that is absolutely not true.
What happened?
Up until Flair, every effort to create a comic book that featured a strong, super powered woman who was not a knockoff of a male comic book failed. You can go back and look it up. Wonder Woman was kind of the exception to that, but that having been said, she never had good sales either. The only reason DC kept that book alive was to maintain the right to continue to use Wonder Woman from the estate, the Charles Moulton. Well, that wasn't his real name. What was his real name?
William Moulton Marston.
Yes, to keep the rights from being reclaimed by the estate. As long as they kept Wonder Woman in print, they could continue to use the character. So that's why she stayed in print. But every other comic book featuring a superpowered woman until Flair appeared on the scene failed. And I was dubious about it because I figured the same pattern would hold. But again, I was wrong. That was the first comic book. It was 48 pages at $2.75 at a time when comic books were 95 cents. Right. I just figured I'd go whole hog with it, go back to the original 48-page idea, put it out there, charge whatever price I needed to charge and see what happens. And it sold like gangbusters. In large measure, I expect because of the Burgard and Beecham cover, right? Because of the Beecham and Burgard artwork that was in the book, it sold like hotcakes. It was the first book we ever had to go back for a second printing for.
So basically, your cover artist and your interior artist were the same people. You got what you saw.
Yeah.
When you wrote the book.
Tim,
Eric,
he's comedic with an underlying seriousness to it, and Mark Beecham is Mark Beecham. I mean, people must know that name.
Eric Boyd here says he picked up a few issues of Flair when he was younger. Been buying the back issues and newer ones of Champions, Flair, and related titles when he can. Well, one place you can get those, and yes, the art was fantastic. Still is fantastic. One place you can get those stories is at the heroicmultiverse.com.
Yeah, absolutely. There are even a few free stories available. If you go there and use the free comics dropdown, you'll find a couple of Flair stories up there, I think, that you can read for absolutely nothing except your time. One other thing is that at the time that happened, we were kind of winding down our comic book operations because back in the 80s, there were always been issues with comic book sales, and we just weren't making a go of it. So we were shutting things down, but I figured I owed it to the fans to get that issue of Flair out there because, they'd been so strongly supportive of her, which is one of the reasons I just kind of blew the whole wad on that to make it, something special. But then the sales came in and I, again, suddenly had to retool. Okay, they like it. Let's do more Flair. Right. So we geared right back up. It took us a little while to, get going again, but we got issue 2 and issue 3 out. And then we got some help from Innovation Comics. They, wanted to publish Flair. They agreed to publish, the Champions also. So they were a help and helped us get back on our feet until we were ready to, go again. So I do owe them a little bit of support for what they did. It's the website.
There is the website, folks. If you haven't clicked over there to it. So yeah, I remember Innovation.
David Campini.
Yeah. I still follow him on Facebook. He has fascinating stories about hiring artists all the time.
I should get him on my Heroic Voice podcast.
Yeah, Glasshouse Graphics, and yeah, the Heroic Voice podcast, folks. Look it up on YouTube. Click it, subscribe. You get some fascinating interviews there. You just had Nat Gertler on last week.
Yeah, and that we had you on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, but you have actual people who do comics on there too.
This weekend we're going to have a bit of a surprise. I'm going to pitch this a little bit. I mentioned Caltech, right? I have an economics degree. It's not going to be exclusively comic book stuff. In the tagline, I say specifically that it's going to be comic book people and other interesting people. This weekend, we've got an old friend of mine, Dennis Santiago, and he's not a comic book person. He is an economist. He and I designed the bank rating tool that the SEC uses to rate banks, to stress test them and try to figure out whether or not they're in any danger of going under.
You're the guy.
Yeah.
Because guess what?
What?
I have a day job.
Oh yeah.
I'm a senior data engineer with a bank.
Uh-huh.
So I hear all this stuff. Well, we're being stress tested. I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't bother me, right?
I am in fact the guy who programmed that. Right. So
well, I had something to talk about on Mondays. Hey, you ain't gonna guess who I talked to today.
So
bringing that up to work.
Anyway, I highly recommend that. We go into great depths about the history of the Federal Reserve, the history of the two banks of the United States, the Civil War era, how the Feds basically screwed the state banks toward the end of the Civil War because they wanted to grab control of the entire banking system. It's a really interesting half hour of talk.
I hear "end the Fed" all the time. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not that politically astute.
So I digressed long enough. Back to Flair.
In
the 90s, we kind of, for economic reasons, had to do black and white. Just color was not feasible back then because of the economics of the situation. I wasn't happy with it, but the important thing was to get the stories out there, keep Flair going, keep some other things going, and black and white printing being relatively inexpensive. We also had an opportunity to do some other comic books, featuring characters, other than Flair. Right? We did an Icicle book, we did a Tigress book, we did Rose, we did Lady Arcane, and we did Chrissy Claus, Santa's little elfin granddaughter.
I have some of those.
She's great. I love that character. I originally designed her for my nieces and nephews. They're much older now, so but Chrissy's a little bit naughty, a little bit nice. There's even we did some Sunday pages for Creators Syndicate that they were never able to sell. But there's a whole series of Flair Sunday pages, comedic superhero tropes. We must have done like 52 of them before creators told us it's not selling. So, and the reason I actually went down to the Orange County Register to pitch it, and what the guy told me was, "I love this. We can't publish it because it's a little risque, and we have declining audience, and they're older, and if we started publishing something like this, we'd get complaints." Right. So,
yeah. Of course, this is the generation that grew up on reading Little Annie Fanny.
Well, I took that for what it was worth. Flair is great, and I'm sure that, in fact, we should collect those into a volume that Critical Blast could publish.
We absolutely should, just like Eric, just like we did with the Flair archive.
Yeah, the Flair Sunday pages. Well, anyway, so then we stopped again, right? Because I had other things to worry about, and the comics weren't really making any money. We weren't losing any money at that point, but we weren't making it either. Then I did keep track. The economics changed again. Print on demand came into play. Color was feasible again. And again, we could start publishing comics, this time in color, right? Without losing very much money. It's something that we could keep going. And Flair made her next comeback. Yay!
Yes.
Yeah. And we got Gordon Purcell to help us out. Beecham was still available, but he's not really into sequential panel art. He's more into design and posters and that kind of thing. So he's done a few stories since then, and he's done a lot of covers for us. But having Beecham as a regular artist on the interior of the book, just not going to happen. So, all right.
The look of Flair changed a lot, costume wise, hairstyle wise. I mean, like a real person almost. They don't wear the same clothes all the time, but a lot of it was, and you could see this in the video we ran at the beginning. A lot of it veered away from your 4-color comic book art and more into like a fashion design.
Yes. Yeah. The original costume.
What was the deal?
The original costume that she wore in that first issue of Champions was the original costume that Stacy had for her. That blue costume with the little light blue centerpiece. When we got into it, I wanted a different design, and I figured that bright colors would be good. So I actually designed the costume that you see starting in Champions number 2. Maybe she wore it in Champions 1. Anyway, that orange costume with the cape was my design. I'm not a great designer, but it worked. It was functional. Then when we decided that we would, in fact, give her own magazine, I asked Tim Burgard to design something. And Burgard is the one who came up with that classic, dark blue starburst white cape costume. I insisted the amulet stay there because that amulet is actually significant. That's a gift from her mother. It's a memory thing, right? It's how she remembers her mother. That amulet was a gift from her. So it's incorporated into her costume. Later on, we wanted to get away from the superhero thing a little bit. When we launched that third iteration, Derek Gross designed the jacket costume that still has the Starburst theme, right? But it's not a typical superhero book. Her superhero costume is, in fact, still that Burgard design, but she doesn't wear it all the time. If she's not out doing, things with the League of Champions, she might wear that jacket outfit. It's, as you say, women don't wear the same thing all the time.
No, they. I feel like wearing this today.
Yeah.
It can still be, recognizable as Flair versus her secret identity. I mean, is her identity secret?
No,
it could be.
It's public knowledge. It was when she was a librarian, right? The Huntsman set up that secret identity for her. You like books, right? Let's set you up in a library. That way you can have access to all the books you want to read. And there's that classic scene, right, where she's not really conscious of that secret identity kind of thing. So she's lugging this huge stack of books in the library effortlessly. And the librarian is going, Terry, you really shouldn't be carrying that many books around. Oh, right. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't.
Yeah, it kind of lets people know who you are, Megaton Man. The stories were, I think they were some of the first. It was that era where you could tell risque kind of stories. Opening up of issue 1, she doesn't realize there's a press conference going on in the other room, and she just gets out of bed and walks in, and she's in the All Together, and she's like immediately covering herself against the flash bulbs.
She's actually kind of wearing a bathrobe, but she hasn't fastened it, right?
Yeah.
She's sleepy. She's still half asleep. Right. Donna wants me to come out there. Okay, I'll come out. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, what? Flash. Right. And suddenly
publicity.
Yeah, Sergio Klein loved that moment. And that's why she went public, right? If you're an international fashion model doing stuff for Sergio Klein jeans, you can't really have a secret identity. Right? People are going to find out who you are, even if you're trying to keep it secret. She just gave us an idea. Yeah. And probably never regretted it much. Privacy is cool, but she's got her own house, so she can have privacy when she wants it.
Yeah, and she's got this amazing set of powers, so it's no one's really going to hang around her house to harass her or stalk her. She's like
a competent household staff. They took on a supervillain all on their own and beat the bejeebers out of it. What issue was that in? That was issue 42 or 43. Anyway, I wanted to give her household staff a chance to shine. So Flair only appears on the last page in that story. It's all about the people who work for her.
Yeah, now Flair's up right over 50 issues now. Am I correct on that?
Not quite. I think we did issue 48, and it's again kind of on hold because I do have limited resources. But issue 49, the story's written. I have stories written for quite a few things. It's just a matter of finding the time and really the artist to get that done. We're concentrating right now on League of Champions stuff. Well, you can see Flair. She's in there. We were doing League of Champions and occasional other books. It's really sporadic print schedule. But you can follow our progress on the website. Every time we get something new, we post it up there so people can see it.
Again, folks, website is
all right.
How to run this. There we go. Right there. You'll know you're in the right spot. Just click the link below the video, or if you're watching on something other than YouTube.
Can you scroll down a little bit?
Can I do what?
Can you scroll that down a little bit on the website?
Absolutely, I can.
Because there is something else I want to point out here. We've started doing some gaming material, right? I mentioned the Champions role-playing game.
Right.
That's the League of Enemies book, which is just now out in digital. It features like 14 different villains who've appeared in the comic books. The League of Enemies is the arch enemy group for the League of Champions, obviously. Scroll down a little bit more. That is the League of Champions source book. 10 different characters, including Flair, background information, power sets, history, stuff that's never appeared in the comic books. If you want to find out more about Flair, stuff that we've never actually talked about in the books, there's a lot of that in there. And also for all those other characters, like her little sister, Olga, aka Sparkplug.
Sparkplug, yes.
Yeah.
I'm learning more about Sparkplug now because of another project we're doing, which we'll mention if you want to mention later.
Yeah, people love that. It's Captain Thunder and Blue Bolt archive, featuring all 12 issues of Captain Thunder and Blue Bolt, plus an out-of-continuity story that appeared in Champions number 38. We did that because it had been a while since Captain Thunder and Blue Bolt had appeared in print. And we just said, Roy, we need to do something with the character here so that you can keep your trademark. So we did another story that we published in the issue Champions. Issue 13 has been on the drawing board for a long time, but we've just never gotten around to doing it. I want to, because that's going to be, again, a 48-page book that concludes the Captain Thunder and Blue Bolt storyline, at least this story arc, the Merchants of Menace story arc. So
I've stopped scrolling here because something just jumped out at me. One of my favorite comic books, and this is going to be 1987, 88. I was in college, and it was a mini series, Alter Ego, and I thought that came from Tomorrow's, but now I'm seeing it here.
Tomorrow's publishes Roy's fan magazine, Alter Ego. Right. Roy also developed a character that he named Alter Ego as a superhero. That was originally published by First Comics. They did a 4-issue miniseries. Roy did that with Ron Harris. Later
Didn't they come with a mask?
Yes, the mask is magical. We collected that into a trade paperback for Roy several years later. And then Roy decided he wanted to do a 5th issue with Ron, so we published a 5th issue. Ron is currently working, at least he's supposed to be working, on issues 6, 7, and 8, although all I've seen of those are the covers. Roy was actually going, I need to get Ron working on that again. Actually, I need to get Ron working on that again. It's just Roy is great. I love Roy. But he talks a mile a minute. He's like the Ben Shapiro of comic books. So,
well, he's got a lot of information that has to get out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Roy and I are going to do an interview on the Heroic Voice sometime after the holidays. So
I can't wait to see that.
People can look forward to that.
Eric says that FemForce is the longest-running indie superheroine title. He wants to know if is Flair considered the second?
Probably is. Flair began in 87, I think, and she's been publishing irregularly ever since then. That's a long time.
Yep. Heroinberg brings up Black Enchantress, Tiger, G-Girl, all best good girl characters of the 80s. Heroinberg, of course, known for producing the comic book Heroinberg, which is also an all-girl super book that you should check out, people. It's a great title out there.
Let me correct you on one thing. The G-Girl is not a 90s character. The G-Girl is actually a 2010s character.
Oh.
And does in fact seem to be our second most popular character. She's, we're getting off of Flair again. She's a third generation superhero. She's the granddaughter of the original Giant, the daughter of the second Giant, and the Nemesis Girl. So anyway, she's out there doing superheroic things, and it's worth a read. She's great. She and Flair are best buds.
So
those are
one of the reasons
here are comic books that are on tap. And actually, these are recent releases, right? We've got that League of Champions book. We've got the Captain Thunder trade paperback that collects the Sparkplug stories. We've got a Sparkplug trade paperback, Tigress 13, which was Dick Giordano's last comic book work. We've got a League of Champions trade paperback, a Giant trade paperback, an issue of the Black Enchantress, and an issue of G-Girl. Those are our eight most recent releases.
And of course, the reason why we're talking tonight is because, well, set the story up a little bit here. We ended up doing, it's a snowball going downhill. Your relationship and our relationship together, because we had done this book for Henry Vogel, the X-Thieves book.
Wonderful book. People should get that. The X-Thieves are great.
They are great. And that led us to getting Southern Nights, but they were like, but we can't do the entire Southern Nights because the last two issues were a crossover with Champions and the characters are in there. It's like a rights issue. So we thought, well, let's contact Dennis and see what we can do about that. Surely this can be worked out. And,
do you have anything to show them? Hold on. You mentioned the Southern Nights book. Do you have anything you can show people?
I do have one thing. I can show them the Amazon page. I don't have anything physically in hand yet.
Let's do that.
I will do that right now. Let me.
This is a big book.
It's a very big book.
Over 1,000 pages, as I recall. It collects Southern Nights 1 through 34, except there's one issue. There was another rights issue.
It collects everything but the last two issues. Which
everything is in there. Also, the Dragon miniseries, right?
Yes, the Dragon miniseries is in here. It's 1,118 pages, people.
Big book.
It's a very big book. This is guaranteed to take out an intruder if they come into your house if you hit them over the head with it. Mm-hmm. And it's $99 retail. Secret, if you go to criticalblast.com and hit the bookstore tab, again, it's linked below. If you buy it there, it's $89. Not only is it cheaper, but the creators will get more money.
Yes,
because it doesn't have to be shared.
People should be advised that these were black and white books, so this volume is black and white.
Right. The black and white book, not a shred of color in it, because publishing comics, you know how it is, Dennis. If you got one page out of 1,000 that's a color page, you've got a 1,000 page color book.
Yep.
We live with it.
We live with it. And you've got that Flair image in the background. Maybe we should show people the cover of this Flair volume, which is also available right now.
In fact, I'm taking you straight to the direct purchase page. If I click on the image,
this is in color.
Yes, this one is in color. This is a $89 book. I think, in fact, I should have.
It's 488 pages, I think. But what we have here is, you remember I said we're doing a 48-page book? We managed to maintain that size throughout the first 10 issues of Flair. So what you're getting here collected in one volume is everything, every story that was in those first 10 issues of Flair, including all the supporting characters. There's Lady Arcane stories, there's a Sparkplug story, there's a Black Enchantress story, there's Eternity Smith is in there.
Yeah, if it was in the comic, it's in this archive. This is a true archive of the comics, and it's 488 pages. It's almost 4 pounds of book.
And it is, to my mind, a wonderful book. You get Burgard art, you get Beecham art, you get Mark Probst artwork, you get Howard Simpson artwork, you get a little bit of Rick Hoberg in there. It's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good stories.
A ton of people, and again, just like the Southern Knights, if you go to criticalblast.com and buy it through there, Heroic will make more money off of it. We like to support our creators, okay? So
you will too.
If you're out of the U.S., you're out of luck, because that direct page only works for U.S. residents. So that's why I put. I've been going through and I've been addressing the bookstore page. So there's always the buy direct button, and most of the time, if I've gotten to it, underneath of it will be a buy from Amazon button. So you have a choice that comes back and says, "Oh, sorry, you're somewhere we don't service." You go back and click the other button.
Let's shift to you. I mean, you said you've been reading issues of Flair. You've got to have.
Well, I had to, haven't I? I mean,
Yeah. You must have some questions, that probably are running through other people's minds. You should start asking them.
Oh, Lord, it's 40 years worth of questions, but
And no, she's not a bimbo.
No, she's not. But there's definitely that unbridled sexuality that runs through the character. I mean, she'll kiss a girl.
Only if she likes the girl.
If she likes the girl, we've seen it happen early on. I think. Again,
she has some questions about that. She didn't like the idea that she was actually kind of attracted to her friend Donna, right? But they eventually resolved that.
Yeah, because
she likes boys. She likes boys. She'll kiss a girl, but she's not into girls.
Okay, so there's a word for that. I think. No.
Girls kiss each other, without it being sexual.
Chat, help me out here. Give me some questions for this. And George, you know what glorious madness is going on here. George is, of course, the guy who puts all the pages together for me.
Hey, George.
He knows I can't be trusted with it. Yes. Next month I will pick up more comics. Please do that. Flair Omnibus, thank you for giving us the link there. He gave us the direct Ingram Spark link. Any advice on how to promote a comic giveaway?
Comic giveaway?
Yeah, don't sell them.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
You can always try to tap into Free Comic Book Day. That happens once a year.
Yes, there is that. If you got you get a hold of Diamond or something, and
Diamond does a Free Comic Book Day every year. People submit books. Diamond selects from them and ships off the free comics to retailers.
And technically, you don't have to go through Diamond, because DC doesn't go through Diamond, and they still participate in Free Comic Book Day.
That's true. Yeah.
Eric says, I've had a mad crush on Divana the Huntress from your videos. Same with Arctica. When funds allow, I will. Oh, this is to Heroinberg. Okay. Again, Heroinberg's running like a FemForce kind of comic. And I'll tell you what's interesting about the Heroinberg stuff, Dennis, is that there's the comic book Heroinberg, and there's the web series Heroinberg, which is live action footage.
Cool.
It's like a serial movie.
But I'm looking for questions about Flair here.
Yeah, but that's what we want, guys. We want questions about Flair. Can you help me out? Wait. So she did like Donna, Lady Arcane a bit. Can you talk about how Flair was bred with her German background, if I remember correctly?
Oh, that question. Yeah. She and her siblings, her sister Olga, her brothers Thomas and why am I blanking on his other name? Thomas and Philip were products of a genetic experiment sponsored by the occult criminal organization Demon. They got a couple of Nazi scientists, brought them out of the Third Reich, propped them up in the Amazon jungle, and said, "Get to work creating Uber people for us." Right. The experiments didn't really work until Hans Gottman, who was in fact Flair's sister's biological father, hit upon the idea of kidnapping Flair's mother, who was a Norse goddess, a Norse demigoddess. figuring that maybe those God genes would help with keeping the product of the experiments alive, so that they could grow up and be loyal soldiers for the Fourth Reich.
So there is a goddess element to her
Yeah.
her existence.
Yeah, she is in fact a clone of her mother. Unlike her sister and her brothers, who were in fact, created in the usual way of combining X and Y chromosomes. With Flair, Hans Goldman decided, I'll just clone this goddess and see what I get. Right? What he got was Flair. So Flair is, although she was raised, as her mother's daughter, she's kind of not. She is a clone. She doesn't know that.
Still,
right? There's no reason for her to know. Nobody's going to tell her. Nobody knows, except she.
Unless it's a story reason for it to actually come up and happen, like oh, by the way, I can defeat you because you're a clone and I can do this.
Well, yeah, I suppose if there were a story reason, but I haven't thought of one, and I don't want to think of one. She also has another sister that she doesn't know about. Not a product of this genetic experiment thing. Her mom had a kid with Giant, which really ticked off her husband, who was the head of Demon. It's a long, convoluted story. You guys should read the comic books. Anyway, the G Girl's mother is in fact Flair's older sister.
Okay, so G Girl's mom is Flair's. Okay, so I'm trying to draw the family tree in my head here. There's a skip generation. Okay, that's a. So how old is
Flair?
Nobody
knows that. Nobody knows that. She knows it. The Nemesis Girl knows it. There are a few people who know it, but that is a closely guarded secret, because if Eric Shadle, who is an evil son of a bitch, who is the head of that occult criminal organization Demon, found out that his wife actually had a child with another man, he would come after that child. So you do not speak of that ever if you're in the Champions universe. It's not something people talk about. Flair doesn't know it.
So let's talk about Flair's power levels, because you mentioned how she's carrying stacks of books. She's obviously very strong.
She's super strong. She's Captain America level strength. She's basically a perfect human. So she could arm wrestle Captain America and hold her own. She could, I think, actually defeat Superman if Superman isn't using his super speed. Right? Not on the strength level, but she absorbs light. She would be capable of draining that solar energy out of him if he gave her the chance. Right? Which, if he knew it was coming, he wouldn't do. So
exactly.
I'd say she could defeat Superman. It's not likely that she actually would.
So she can absorb light, and of course she can emit light.
Yes, she has photoactive organelles embedded in her skin that provide the conduit for her to do that. She absorbs and stores photonic energy, releases it as kinetic energy. The more light she has access to, the more powerful she is. In one of those Sunday strips, we did an old Flash riff with the Amazing Darkon, where he trapped her in a dark bubble and shot her off into space. And she went to the sun, right? Burst open the bubble, supercharged, right? Zoom, right back to her. Darkon's gloating, bam! And
that would super. I've just added her to my superhero domino list now, because you talked about how she can absorb light and releases kinetic energy. I've often had this image of Dazzler, who absorbs sound and releases it as light energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, what happens if Black Bolt screams at Dazzler and she takes that and turns it into light? Now she's going to pass it to Flair, and Flair's going to punch something. I think she could crack a planet.
I don't think it'd get that high, but she got really powerful. And the funny thing, the punchline in the story is, right? She told Donna what had happened, Right? Lady Arcane, her friend, and Donna said, "I'm not interested in your stupid fairy tales. if you want to, go on with the story, write it up for the comic book. Just don't tell me the stupid thing. Darkon shooting you into space, you going to the sun, absorbing light, flying
Never
back.
heard anything so ridiculous.
Yeah, but it did happen, right? Donna didn't believe it because it's really kind of unbelievable that Flair can do that kind of thing. The only reason she survived is because she was in that bubble, right? She had air, right? And then she came back so fast from the sun, that 8 minutes she could hold her breath that long, right? So
does she have any sort of a? Please don't eat the microphone, Teddy. I'm dog sitting. It's not my dog. Does she have any weaknesses? Does she have a kryptonite?
Yeah, she does. Darkness, right? That's why the amazing Darkon is kind of her arch nemesis. That's why Nyx, the goddess of the dark, she has trouble.
The longer she's in dark, the weaker she gets. Sort of like
Right.
It's like Birdman. Birdman
Yeah.
was always weak under a cloud. He had to fly up and absorb sunlight and then come back.
Yeah. But yeah, if she doesn't have access to light, she'll use up her energy. So she can see in the dark. Absolutely. If there's absolutely no light, she can't see. If there's any light at all, no problem. And that's a trait she shares with her sister. Olga can also see in the dark. Olga has electrical abilities where Flair is like, light. She's the lightning. Philip was a shapeshifter.
Even in a dark room, there's some amount of light.
Yeah, Philip was a shapeshifter, and their brother Thomas was just super strong and tough and durable. Right, sort of beyond Captain America would be a good analogy for that. Blockbuster.
Blockbuster. Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've written the script for 49. Which means that 50 is in the future, and 50 is, an auspicious number for a comic book series.
Yeah, well, I have some ideas for that. We're kind of in the beginning of a Challenge of the Gods storyline that'll run, I hope, run across several different titles and wrap up in Flair number 50. Flair number 50 will be the conclusion of that multi-title Challenge of the Gods storyline. She does have an alternate identity. You remember we talked about the goddess aspect of her?
Right.
The Olympian gods see her as the goddess of the dawn. To them, she's Eos. And Zeus, she actually lived in Olympus for a little while during that period between the black and white comic books and the color revival. The reason she wasn't on Earth is because she was living in Olympus. And issue 20 begins when she comes back to Earth, having found out that Zeus was cheating on her. So I don't want anything more to do with him. She is technically married to the king of the Olympian gods, although she doesn't see it that way.
Okay.
Like, I divorce you. I'm no longer married to you. You were cheating on me. I'm going back to Earth. Right? So even
now
though
she has other duties in addition to, supermodel, superhero, super goddess.
Yeah. So this Challenge of the Gods storyline is basically Zeus behaves like Zeus. The goddesses of Olympus get pissed at him and decide they want their own goddess to be queen of Olympus, not to be queen just by virtue of being married to Zeus. Right? But they still like the idea of Flair, being queen of Olympus. But they want her to be queen in her own right. So they set up this challenge where any goddess who wants to compete can compete for the right to be queen of Olympus. And that's basically the story.
Oh, we did get another question from the chat, but Herrenberg, this was you're going to have to roll back because this was the first thing Dennis talked about in the in our interview here, which was the connection between Champions and the role-playing game Champions.
The original Champions characters who appeared in the book were based on characters run by the people who created the Champions role-playing game. The Huntsman, Rose, Giant, who was called Goliath in the game, but for obvious reasons we weren't going to call Goliath in the comic book, and Flair. Those were the heroes that we selected. I thought those were the best ones. I also added in my own characters, Dr. Arcane and Lady Arcane. Later on, many of the characters are created by people who, played games with the Champions game with us. Villains, a few heroes. Most of the heroes that appear in the Champions comic books came out of the Champions game in one way or another. Not all of them, to be certain, but a lot of them.
It's sort of a special moment, I would guess, when you're playing the game and somebody brings in a new character and you see the character play out and you're like, hey, we're gonna use that.
I don't do it that way, but yeah, it's kind of like that. I ran a campaign a few months ago around the Rods of Fairy, which is a storyline that is going to be appearing in the League of Champions comic book. The premise of that campaign was that Rose and the Black Enchanters, who are partners in Witch Girls Incorporated, which is a detective agency run by witches, right? A good witch and a bad witch, were busy, right? There was something big in the works that they needed to deal with, but they still had all these cases that needed to, be tended to. So they hired some people, and the players were running characters who had some kind of mystical background, who'd been hired by Witch Girls Incorporated to take care of these little cases that the head witch girls were too busy to tend to. And that was the basis. Yeah. And we're going to be doing, you saw the League of Enemies and the League of Champions source books. I'm going to be doing a Witch Girls Incorporated adventure book with Tiger Paw Press that will be basically that campaign, where the players will be invited to create characters of some mystical connection, and they start taking up the cases that will be featured in that adventure volume.
And that therein lies the answer to Heroinberg's current question, which is it still going as an RPG? I mean, any RPG that you're still playing, I guess, is still going, but
yeah, Champions is still out there from Hero Games. They're in their 6th edition, and you should be able to find it online if you want to get it. We don't have any direct connection with them. There are kind of issues between us and Hero Games, but we're not hostile. We're just not working with each other anymore. And what I do, what they do, they do.
Yeah, it's and maybe someday, but not right now. Yeah. Folks, if you want to know more about Flair, if you didn't catch up on things, it would please me greatly if you would go and get the first edition, the first volume of the Flair Archives. It would please me greatly because it would give Dennis the impetus to do a second volume and a third volume. So
I want to.
I want to too.
For the second volume, I want to do all of those stories from the 90s. The ones that now exist in color that we originally did in black and white in Flair Adventures, and in Flair First Edition, which were the 3 Flair titles we published during that period. For the third volume, obviously, I'll want to do the stuff that we started doing in the 2000s and go up to some good stopping point there.
We love making big books, George and I. It's turned into, we thought this was going to be the biggest book we did. We're like, wow, this is, how many pages was this? Was it like, I got to get past the letters pages to see. I don't know how many pages this was. We didn't put page numbers on this one. But it pales in comparison to something like Southern Nights now. Southern Nights is going to be 3 times the thickness of this book.
Yeah. That X-Thieves is about the same size as the Flair volume, right?
Yeah, that's going to be about the same size as that. 300 and some odd pages. Let's see here. Am I sharing the right page? There we go. This is the...
We're seeing it again. There it is. Okay. All righty. Any last questions here?
No, we're running over time. 488 pages. That's how many it is.
Uh-huh.
So it's a big book. We've run over time here. A lot of good interaction from the chat. Thank you guys for that. Dennis, thank you for coming on, man.
Thank you, RJ. It was a pleasure being here. Let's do it again when the Captain Thunder volume comes up.
We will do that. Yes, folks. We are doing the archive of the 10 issues of Captain Thunder and Blue Bolt. Written by this young lad, Roy Thomas. He's got a spark. He's going to go places, I think.
Roy and Dan. Roy and his wife on that book together.
I always loved the Roy and Dan Thomas. It's just-
So we can try to get Roy on for that chat when we do it, but it's going to be a little difficult because he's not set up to do this from home. He has to drive, and he doesn't like driving in the dark. Night vision issues at this
so
point.
we'll work something out.
Yeah, we'll have to figure it out somehow.
George says Flair's about 500 pages. XD's was 338 pages. So Flair is actually going to be
Bigger.
thicker than this.
Flair is thick.
Yes, in all the right ways.
Yeah.
Parting shot here. We love Flair. Everyone hit the like button. Now I have to go pack up for Big Apple Comic-Con. Good luck to you, sir. Thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. We don't have a podcast without you guys in the chat doing your thing. We're just a podcast falling in the woods, otherwise making no noise at all. So we're glad you came. And
Thank you very much.
Yes, and as I always say, guys, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night, everybody.